there we go. So we're recording now. We're here with Elaine Clegg, Council President of the Boise City Council and an alum of Boise State University. Is that right?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, Elaine, I wondered if you could start by telling us how you got started, how you ended up in elected office.
Well, kind of a long story. Certainly no history of it in my family, which I think is an important thing, that there has been a tendency in this country for people to follow in footsteps. And there are lots of ways to elected office. In my case, it was activism in my neighborhood. I've long been active in community issues, but something happened in my neighborhood that specifically got me interested. I joined my neighborhood association, ended up as neighborhood association president, ended up in the middle of the Hulls Gulch effort to preserve Hulls Gulch as a result of that, and then managed a city council campaign out of that effort for Ann Houserath, who was the leader of that. And she extracted a promise from me that I'd consider running when my children got old enough. So when my youngest daughter turned 12, there you go, I did.
Oh, that's great.
In the meantime, I had done a lot of work in those 12 years on city committees and so forth. So
yeah. More than one way to end up in an elected office.
yeah.
But yeah, that's great. Well, tell us what do you do when you're a council member? What are your major duties? What do you spend your time on? The majority of your time as a council member.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to talk pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Okay.
Pre-COVID, actually a pretty fun and certainly demanding job, but maybe less immediate, if you will. The impacts of the things that you're doing, more long-term. So typically a council member, the most important thing you do every year probably is the budget.
Yeah.
You are the ones who set the budget. And while the mayor typically writes the budget or has the staff write the budget at the mayor's direction, the city council is really responsible for what's in it. And so, hopefully if you're doing that well and doing that right, you're spending a lot of time over the first part of the year understanding what all of the different departments are asking for and why they're asking for it, and then you approve it.
Mm-hmm.
Or not, or change it or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's done well and done right. It's a long process, and it should include in part the business planning part of the city, which is separate from the comprehensive and land use planning part of the city.
Sure.
I think people misunderstand that if you have a comprehensive plan, you have a strategic plan for the city, and you really don't. Mm-hmm. The strategic plan is more of a business plan about how you run the business, and that's really what the budget is about. The thing mm-hmm. you spend the most time on, however, is land use, because city council sits as the deciding body and the appeal body on all land use decisions. So on rezones and subdivisions, we are the body that makes the decision. On everything else, land use, we're typically the body that is the appeal body. And so we sit as kind of a quasi-judicial, in a quasi-judicial role, ruling on the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Design Review Commission's work. Occasionally mm-hmm. on the Parks Commission, a few of those things, but mainly it's planning and zoning and a little bit of design review. Mm-hmm. And you typically have 2 or 3 of those every single council meeting. So on a day-to-day basis, that's what you spend your time on. And a lot of people go into city council really not understanding land use or land use procedure. I'm kind of a process wonk as well as a policy wonk. And I typically, if you get the process right, you'll come out with at least a good informed decision. If you get the process wrong, you can often make mistakes because something's been missed along the way. Yeah. So understanding that system really well has been very helpful for me as a mm-hmm. council member, because I can often spot mistakes.
Okay. a follow-up on the budget. The format that you get the material to review the budget, are, you know, in our MPA program, we talk about different budget formats, you know, that it's a line item budget or it's a program budget or whatever. Do you, as I recall, Boise City uses a sort of a program thing, right? Like the police set out their goals, and then you look at how their budget relates to those goals, as opposed to, we got $10 last year, we want $12 this year.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, yes, that is right. However, the line item is all there, typically in the back of the budget. I will tell you that if you go to this year's budget, it used to be about that thick, and this year it's about that thick. So that line item detail is not there because there just hasn't been time to develop all of it in the face of trying to understand how to budget with the CARES Act, how to budget for COVID, how to deal with not taking any increase in property taxes. And so it's a little bit different budget this year, but typically it's, like I talked about, we do a real strategic planning process budget. So over the months of January, February, March, we typically go through presentations by each department about program issues and things they'd like to grow, things that we may have discovered that they're doing that we don't need to do anymore,
Right.
Things they're not doing today that they should be doing, those kind of things. And then we set out a budget, some budget parameters based on those program items, and then they come back to us with the detail. This year's been much different. We decided early on, given the fact that the legislature has not fixed the homeowners exemption or the circuit breaker or done anything else to provide residential property owners with any kind of property tax relief, that we would reduce the amount of increase that we're taking in property taxes. And so we did that. And doing that, then we had to pare back things. We had to look for savings. But we still wanted to identify those strategic areas where investment right now is actually really important. I think sometimes people look at government budgets as, you know, just continuing to do what you used to do. The other, I think, difference that Boise has done over the last 15 plus years is really look at where can we strategically invest public taxpayer dollars that will help the economy, help our citizens have better lives, and help us provide better service to them. And so there's still about $2 million in those kind of strategic investments in this budget, despite everything else.
Could you give an example of what one of those strategic areas are?
Well, so for instance, we've over the last 10 years developed a climate action plan, and there's about $700,000 of stuff that will implement items in the climate action plan, things that will bring the city towards zero energy or all renewable energy, things that will reduce climate footprint in various ways. There's also, even pre the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, we've been working toward a diversity and inclusion ethic that's inculcated in the culture of City Hall. And so there's a couple of $100,000 invested in ensuring that we're looking across the organization to make sure that we're doing that everywhere we should be.
That's great. Thank you. You've now been on the council long enough to have seen a change in mayors. And I wondered what, if any, difference you see between, not necessarily comparing, you know, Lauren and David so much as what difference does it make who's the mayor?
Style is very important, and style is different between the two of them. I think at the end of the day, policies won't be all that different. But the style has been something that everyone's had to get used to, including council members. And I guess the relationships are also an important part of how you work with someone. And moving from a relationship of a peer, Lauren was on the city council with me, to one as, she being the mayor, I being the city council president. It's been an interesting bit of work for both of us, I think, to understand how that new relationship works and what's the best way to make sure that we're getting the best for the city out of everyone who's in leadership.
Yeah. In our state and federal version of government, there are separated powers, and the two branches don't always see the same or are often in conflict. Is it the same at the city level? Is the council and are the council and the mayor set up to be in conflict like that?
They can be, and I guess, I have kind of a personal philosophy of local government being one of finding solutions and hoping that those two branches of government, although they're somewhat co-equal, can find ways to work together in concert and not in opposition. I think if you look around both the region and the country, there are certainly examples of cities where the city council and the mayor do not work well together. They're often in conflict, and those are often places where it's hard to get things done, where the economy suffers sometimes because the mayor wants to make an investment the city council doesn't, that may help economic development, for instance. Housing, I think, would be another place where I could see that being in conflict. Together, we've cobbled together about almost $12 million for housing investments. We're all pretty much on the same page about how that should go forward in a different system. Let me just say that with a new mayor, it could have been relatively easy to pick a fight by the council as a whole, not individually, against the mayor's policies or not. And instead, at least my philosophy, and I think the reason I got elected city council president, is that we're a team. And although we need to hold the executive branch accountable, that is part of what our duty is. We also, for the good of the citizens of the city, should be working together in every way that we can to make sure that we're creating the best quality of life we can for everyone.
You probably have already alluded to this when you talked about your strategic initiatives, but could you say what you think the biggest challenges are facing Boise?
I think we're at that point right now where we're tipping from a mid-sized city into a bigger city. And with that comes some really big challenges. I think we're seeing that both on the political end as people try to bring different and more polarized politics into play at the city level, but also I think we're seeing it on the policy end where we have some surrounding communities that are trying to play off of us. Well, we're not Boise, come to us because, and I'm hoping as a region we can avoid some of that, but I think a larger metro center city in other places typically has some problems that Boise doesn't have. And I think if we navigate this period of time well, we can avoid those problems. And if we don't, we could end up with some of them. Our education system is still very strong. Many core cities don't have that. Our social service system is still strong. We have relatively few social service issues compared to other cities that are our size or larger. And I think that we have a community that's always tried to put forward a caring philosophy about everyone in the community. And I'm hoping that we can keep that together as we face these new challenges. I think the new world, whatever it looks like, will require a city of our size to really think about mid-wage workers, both in housing and in the kinds of jobs that are available. So I think for me, another big challenge is, do we have enough of the right kind of housing that those mid-wage workers can live in Boise? do we have enough of the right kind of jobs that without a 4-year college degree, you can at least make a reasonable living. I think the future is going to require that of strong areas. So those are the challenges I see.
Sort of that workforce house.
Yeah.
Final question. So many cities facing issues about police and policing. Do you have any thoughts about where Boise is in regard to our situation with the police?
I do. You know, shortly after I got elected, we had the last in a series of really awful officer-involved shootings. Matthew Jones was shot and killed by a Boise police officer in a mental health crisis. And as a result of that, over the last 16 years, the city of Boise's moved really hard and far toward a community policing model. Certainly not perfect. There's certainly things that can be done better, but a typical police force will have about 2/3 patrol enforcement officers and 1/3 community officers. We have about the opposite.
Okay.
And if you look at our crime statistics compared to other cities our size that are similar to us, Spokane, Salt Lake, et cetera, our crime is about half what theirs is, and it's been declining while theirs has either been level or trending up a little bit. I happen to believe that a lot of that is due to our move toward community policing. We still occasionally have officer-involved shootings. They're always tragic. They're much less often, and we haven't had one with the same kind of characteristics as some of those early ones had. Now, excuse me, having said that, police are asked to do too much right now. We've created a society where we have a lot of people who are in fragile positions, either economically or with mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And we've asked our police to be the line of defense against all of those. And that's not an appropriate role for police in many instances. So what's the answer? I tell people we defunded mental health and we defunded housing about 40 years ago, and we're dealing with the unintended consequences of those. We did that in a sort of a reactionary moment. And so I'm pausing to try and think, I don't know that defund is the right answer. I think the answer is, let's look comprehensively at the issues police are being asked to address and understand if there's other ways to address them. And that might include some things in the police force. It might include some things out of it. I think another, for me, very important piece of it is that cities have very specific statutorial roles, and our role does not include mental health. And while it includes housing on the land use side, it doesn't include housing policy, fair housing, those kinds of things. And so if we're going to be asked to step into those, I need to have some authority and some regulatory power if I'm going to be successful, and some funding, frankly. What I do have statutorily are police, fire, parks, libraries, and a few other things, but those are very clearly in my statutory arena. And so I think we need to be careful to point at cities and say, you fix all of this for us, without recognizing that, A, they may not have the power, they may not have the purse, and if they don't, it won't be systemic and structural. And so, yes, we need to make changes. Yes, they need to be systemic and structural. And yes, they need to involve many more agencies and levels of government besides the city. But the city should and can take a leading role in beginning that move, I think.
It's a great answer. These are complicated issues that touch on so many levels of government and areas of administration. Elaine, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me and the students, and best of luck on the city council. We didn't talk much about COVID in particular, but I know that's taking up a ton of your time, and I hope that, I hope that soon our numbers are looking better than they are here on July 20th in Boise. And anyway, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.